Well, hello, everybody, and welcome in to GC Live. It's the Sunday reset here on Gamecock Central. Jack, thank you so much for having me on. I'm Kendall Smith. Obviously, we've got Jack Veltri here as well. And Jack, this is typically your solo show on Sundays, but I'm joining you here today. We're going to talk women's basketball, the big day for A'ja Wilson, and then, of course, baseball as well. But first and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing good, Kendall. Yeah, you're right. This technically is my show and all, but you know what? I'd rather have no one else out here hosting it and doing the duties better than I ever could. So I appreciate you joining me, Kendall, today. I know we were supposed to go live earlier in the week, but we ended up just deciding let's just do it on Sunday. It's a good day to do so, obviously, with everything going on in South Carolina athletics, and it's been a great week. So how are you doing, though?
Yeah, I'm doing well, and it has been an exciting day for South Carolina athletics. We're going to get into talking about that here in just a little bit, but all is well here. And I'm excited because we get some baseball talk today, Jack. We haven't really dove into baseball a ton. We've kind of just barely scratched the surface in the last live you and I did together. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more from you, some scrimmages taking place at Founders Park, getting to see a little bit more of the team and of the group that South Carolina has this year. And I know you're a huge baseball fan, obviously, so we'll get your takeaways from that. But I want to start it off by giving a shout out to our amazing presenting sponsor.
Yep, right above us here, as always, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home or you need help out with your mortgage, but you don't know where to begin, Clint is your guy to call. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. And he's a lifelong Gamecock fan and a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central. Again, you will see his name if you're watching live right above us here on all of our GC Live programs. So always appreciate Clint for that. But the number to call is 803-422-6797. You can also go to the NMLS number, which is 71597, or go to clinthammond.com to get that process started.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate Clint and all that he does. And good evening to each and every one of you as well. We're excited to be here. A little Sunday night, kind of switching it up here this week with Jack and I. I'm intruding on his Sunday reset, but we do have a lot to talk about today. And I want to start it off by talking about the exciting day at Colonial Life Arena. Really, nobody more deserving to have a day like this than A'ja Wilson. Her jersey officially retired, and she has already been one of the most impactful athletes to ever grace the University of South Carolina. But this just further cements her legacy, what she's done. Jack, we've all seen it all over social media. It's been fantastic to watch. Your takeaways from today with A'ja Wilson.
Yeah, and in case you missed it, here's the clip of how it went. So anyway, like you were saying, Kendall, my takeaways. Number one, this is a well-deserved honor for, honestly, the GOAT of South Carolina women's basketball. Like you think about how far this program has come, and obviously Dawn Staley's at the nucleus of it. She's the centerpiece that kind of got this whole thing started. But you obviously need players to recruit, and Dawn brought in one of the greatest college basketball and just honestly basketball players of all time. From a women's side of things, I mean, A'ja, you look at just all the accolades that she's won. I mean, it takes up literally an entire Wikipedia page, number one. But just to see this happen, it's well-deserved, obviously. I know she had her statue unveiled a few years ago, but that was obviously during the COVID years and stuff. And that wasn't, I think, the same. If that were to happen today, obviously it'd be insane. Like so many people would have shown out for that. But this, I feel like, is her true day in the sun to kind of just soak it all in and enjoy this week. I mean, she was at the men's game last night, and then she was, had her own media availability at practice the other day. And obviously today's the big day for her. So well-deserved without question. And she's definitely one of South Carolina's own. And just, it's cool to see her coming back here and just understanding where she came from and what this place means to so many people, including herself.
Yeah, I mean, the event looked absolutely fantastic. When you're watching it on social media, obviously, as someone that couldn't be there, I'm like, I wish I could have been there for that because it just looked fantastic. And the way that Asia was clearly just so honored and emotional to have that moment, and a moment that she deserves so much for what she's done to really launch this program forward. I mean, as you said, Dawn Staley, a major role is played by her and why this program is the way that it is. But Asia Wilson really set the tone in terms of players for this group, and that caliber of talent and that level that we've seen at such a consistent basis now for the South Carolina women's basketball team. So I loved watching every second of it. I'm still taking in all of the content because there's so much. There's a picture of Dawn and Asia that I love so much. I mean, they obviously have such a great relationship, and Dawn does with so many of her players, but this was necessary. I'm so happy that it happened. And there is nobody, as I've said probably 5 other times now on the show, that is more deserving of something like this than Asia Wilson. And the fact that she's local just makes it even better.
I thought it was so cool that, number one, I just like seeing her soak it all in and stuff. But the moment that really stood out to me is when you watch the ceremony and stuff. And obviously neither of us got a chance to be there today, watching, just on clips and stuff. You see her reaction when the jersey is unveiled from the rafters and stuff, and you could just see the tears kind of starting to swell in her eyes and stuff. She's got her family there and stuff, and it was just a really cool moment to see all that. And it's a player that's super deserving of all of these accolades. Like, again, you don't give statues, jersey retirements, and all this stuff to random players. You give this to all-time greats, and she's definitely one of them. And the really cool part about this is, and I'm glad South Carolina went out and made this clear, and I know Dawn definitely did, is that no one's ever going to wear 22 again, which is totally understandable and makes complete sense. Because you see sometimes with jersey retirements, it's not the same thing as number retirements, right? Mm-hmm. But in this case, it's going to be no one else is wearing 22 for the women's basketball program anymore. And that's the way it should be. This is one of your all-time greats, if not the great, in South Carolina women's basketball history. So it's really cool to see how this day went and just this entire weekend in general for her.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, the way that the team rallied around her, there was a great video. I think Asia was posing for a couple of cameras that were around, and then the entire team decided to get in on the action. I mean, she, even though isn't in Columbia all the time anymore, obviously, because she is crushing it in her professional career, the way that she still plays such a role with the team, even from afar, and obviously from the impact that she's had and what she's done at South Carolina, what she continues to do at the professional level, that is felt and that is seen. And you could really see that today in those videos, the way that the girls were rallying around her. It was really awesome. It was special. And like I said, I had FOMO from watching it because I wanted to be there. Jack, you weren't there either. You were at the baseball game. So we'll get into talking about that a little later. But a huge congratulations to Asia Wilson. She is the best of the best. And that now and forever is in the rafters at Colonial Life Arena, as it should be.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget that there also was a basketball game today played, and just all the excitement of Asia and stuff. There still was a game, and I think we can get started talking about that a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, the women's basketball team just continues to roll. And obviously there was the jersey retirement, the number retirement today, which was the number one thing that everyone's been talking about. And it just speaks so much, Jack, to this team, because it's just the expectation for the South Carolina women's basketball team right now. And like, we will continue to say that. We have said that, but you have Asia Wilson's number retirement, jersey retirement here today. And then the team goes out and they play a game, and like, nobody's stressed. Nobody's like, it's just like, they've got it. Like, and that is the best feeling. Like, I mean, you and I know this as fans of teams, everybody knows, like, to have that level of confidence in a team, I feel like is something that we probably all take for granted in a little bit of a way, because you always know that they're going to show up. You always know they're going to be ready. They're going to be prepared. So even with everything happening here today, for them to go out, for them to be dominant again, it's not a surprise, but I just think it needs to be said that like, that is such a gift to have a program of that talent level where you can be like, yeah, like I'm not really stressed whenever it's game time situation, even when there's a lot going on outside of the game.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I mean, again, it was an 83-66 win for South Carolina today. But I mean, at certain points in the game, it did get pretty close. Like Auburn for all intents and purposes, really did play pretty well in this game, despite what the score might indicate. Like, I mean, this was a game that going into the third period, it's a one possession game, and Auburn's on your heels. But I think the thing with South Carolina is, and we've said this multiple times, Kendall, it's just you have so much talent on this team to where you can go out and rely on different players to go out and score. And here's the thing. You could still turn the ball over 15 times and still find a way to win convincingly, mainly because you're also able to force Auburn to turn the ball over as much as they did. I mean, Auburn turned it over 23 times in this game. You have 25 points off those turnovers, and give a lot of credit to Auburn. I mean, they had Deanna Gaston had 31 points today on 14 of 22 shooting, and you have 4 or 3 other players score in the double digits in your starting 5. But again, it is South Carolina's ability to make other teams make mistakes, and you are able to convert consistently. So I think just a great overall game for South Carolina. Obviously, you would have liked to keep it, with the way the final score was throughout the game. You would have loved to have a little bit more separation. But obviously, as the second half went along, once you got back up by double digits and stuff, you were really able to take control of this thing the rest of the way. And I think you got to be satisfied with where things are at right now for this team. Obviously, this is an Auburn team that on paper you might look at the record and stuff and say, oh, okay, they're not that good compared to South Carolina, obviously. But this has been a stretch of where you were just coming off playing, I think, 5 games in a row against top 25 teams, won those games. You had a little bit of time off. You got this game in. You won pretty convincingly here. And, the quest to get back to the top continues. And I think there's something to be said about what you mentioned. Like, there's not panic in this team. Like, obviously, when you win as much as they do, they are battle tested. They know what they're doing. So it's another big game for South Carolina, obviously on a special day. And it could have been something where maybe that overshadows what they did or affected their play on the court because of the emotions of the ceremony and all of that. But obviously, as the game wore on, they were able to really lock in and get this victory.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the way that Dawn leads the group, right? Like, even when you have some of those tighter moments, again, that confidence level, like, at least for me, from a personal perspective, it's like I'm not as stressed as I would be maybe with other teams or other scenarios because I know that Dawn has the group locked in. They always are focused. They always are on it. And like, even when you are in some of those situations that are a little bit tighter than maybe you'd like, you feel good about where South Carolina is from the standpoint of being able to handle that pressure and being able to handle a game that's maybe a little close for comfort at certain times. And again, it just speaks to this program and people like Asia Wilson who have made this program exactly what it is, which is the pinnacle of college basketball. It is the top of the top. It's where everybody wants to go. People feel like if they don't go to South Carolina, they're missing out. That's what Dawn Staley said. Because of the environment, because of what South Carolina has, what they offer, what they've done, what they're going to do, the upward trajectory they continue to be on after all they have already accomplished is huge. So much of that is credit, obviously, to Dawn Staley, but to people like Asia Wilson as well. You think about the Aaliyah Bostons of the world too. I mean, those kind of players are difference-making players in your program. And that's why days like today need to happen. They need to get recognized for that.
No, most definitely. Again, this is a great weekend for South Carolina women's basketball. Just a really good one. And again, the thing with Asia is, going back to her for a minute, like, she's a local product, played at Heathwood right here in Columbia and stuff. She's from the area and came here and had a great career. And now she's having obviously won 3 WNBA and MVP awards. Like, she's having a great pro career too. So it just shows, if anything, like, you can make it in your hometown. You can be a star and play right here at South Carolina. And just for any player around the country, like you mentioned it, players want to come here to USC and be like Asia Wilson and stuff. So it's great to see that one of their own is having such a great career at the college and pro level now and getting all these accolades, getting her jersey retired, statue out front of CLA. So it's a great weekend for women's basketball at South Carolina, and obviously the Gamecocks get another big win at home.
Yeah, you love to see it. Love to see what happened today. Love to see things keep rolling for the Gamecock women's basketball team. They are doing a fantastic job as always. We love to cover them here on the show, and we also love to cover baseball. It's so much fun. Jack, you had the chance to, we got a little
Yep,
a
we're ready.
background switch. You caught me off guard, Jack, with the technical like switch up on us. He's like producing over from his seat. It's very, very impressive. But yeah, we got the baseball field now as our background, and we're going to talk a little baseball here on the show. Jack, you had the chance to be out for the scrimmages this weekend, and you just get that feeling before baseball season starts. I feel like it's one of the best feelings leading into any sports season, right? Like I kind of get that feeling before football season as well, but before baseball, there's just something about it where it's exciting. And like you have the opportunity to go to these scrimmages, or in professional baseball where I work, obviously we have spring training and that's the build up to actual opening day. But you go to these scrimmages and you kind of get a feel for where things are at with the group and how guys are doing and where things kind of might lay out. And South Carolina has a lot of exciting guys on the team, obviously coaching change, and we're super excited about that too. We talked about that on the last show. But Jack, now that you've had the chance to kind of take this in, and a lot of people are feeling optimistic about this team, do you still feel optimistic, at least as optimistic as you did the last time we talked about the team before you saw any scrimmages?
Yeah, I feel better about where things are at through 2 weekends of scrimmages. And I was at Friday's scrimmage and then earlier today on Sunday scrimmage. So I've had the chance to see this team in action a handful of times now since the preseason began. And yeah, I feel pretty good about where things are at. As for how optimistic the fans should be, I think you got to keep – it depends on how you look at expectations and stuff and what your perception of how South Carolina should do is. Like, if you think they're going to get to Omaha this year, that's great. Like, I no one knocks you for that. At the same time, I think you got to keep it realistic to where it's year one of a new era of South Carolina baseball. You have a lot of new players coming in. You have a lot of returning talent too. We've seen this team, I think, mesh together pretty well through scrimmages and stuff, but I'm still wondering what it's going to really, really look like when opening day is here and when the season gets going. And I've always said, I think the Clemson series, that third weekend of non-conference play, really tells you where you're at. And this is a Clemson team that, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, could very well be on the track to go to the College World Series this year. They are a very talented team that just missed out on doing so last year. So it's going to be a great challenge for South Carolina. And if that's a weekend where you win 2 out of 3 and you win one of the first 2 games either in Clemson or in Greenville, and then you take the last one back in Columbia, you're feeling really good about your chances going into SEC play and stuff. So I think you got to be optimistic about where this group is heading this year. Obviously, you have Ethan Petrie leading the way. He had another homer this weekend to bring him up to 4 total this preseason so far, but there's also a lot of other players that are really sticking out, I think, in my opinion.
So you're not predicting a trip to Omaha right now?
Well, I would not say that. Like, year one going to Omaha would be awesome. Do I think this team has the talent to do it? Yes, I do think they can get there. But I also just think, number one, there are so many other good teams in college baseball, not just in the SEC, but the other conferences like the ACC. I know the ACC is the ACC, but like there's some teams in there like your Florida States, your Clemsons, teams like that could be pretty good. But obviously the SEC is the cream of the crop in terms of teams that are going to probably host super regionals and stuff and get to Omaha. Like, you had, I think, 4 teams get to the College World Series last year from the SEC alone. So it's a very top-heavy conference. And the fact that we just don't know what this team really is going to turn out to be, like, are they going to be better defensively? That's one of my big questions with this team. Is we've seen them make some errors through the preseason here, and it hasn't always been perfect at times from a defensive standpoint. I think they're a lot better off now, whereas opposed to where they were back in the end of the regular season and into postseason play, where you just weren't sound defensively. But I think they got that kind of cleaned up. And then what's the pitching staff going to look like? Who's going to step up on the mound, and who's going to step up around Ethan Petrie? I think that's all stuff that will be answered here relatively soon. But I think going to Omaha in year one of Maneri, it's possible, but you would need to get hot at the right time, I think, in my opinion. And hosting a regional, hosting a super would definitely help with that. But if you're going on the road, it becomes a little bit tougher.
Well, that is the expectation for South Carolina baseball, as we very well know, such a great history with the program. And actually, this was going to be one of my next questions. This is always fun to kind of play around with, especially as we get a little bit closer to opening day. But Jack, if you're looking at it from an opening day perspective, so your opening day starter, you're also going to predict with this as well.
Yes.
What do you foresee?
So I'll start out with the starting nine, like the question kind of asked here, and we'll get into the other questions about who's standing out and scrimmages and all that stuff as we go along here. But I think your starting nine looks something like this. I think you have Talmadge LeCroy behind the plate. His bat has been very consistent. He went 3 for 3 today in scrimmages. He might not have the biggest hits. Like, he has a lot of bloopers that just dunk in for hits, but it still hits at the end of the day. He's getting on base. I feel pretty good about him behind the plate too. I think he's probably going to win the catching job. First base, Ethan Petrie. Second base, I would imagine it's maybe Will Tippett. His defense hasn't been great, though, so far with 5 errors in the preseason. So maybe that's something that worries you a little bit. Shortstop, Henry Kazmar. Third base, KJ Scobie. I think in the outfield, you're going to have Nathan Hall out in center. I would imagine maybe Dalton Mayshore out in left or right. And then I think Blake Jackson in the other corner outfield spot. And then I would have Kennedy Jones, me personally, just DHing. I think he had a nice play today in the outfield where he threw a runner out trying to turn a single into a double. But I think there are better outfielders on this team from a defensive standpoint than him. But you got to have his bat in the lineup, of course. So I would have him DHing. And then your weekend rotation. I know everyone wants to see Eli Jersenbeck be that Friday night starter. Me personally, and I did not get a chance to see him throw this weekend, but I'm just looking at the notes and stuff that we have on Gamecock Central. It didn't seem like his outing went particularly great. I mean, he gave up 2 runs in the second inning, 3 more in the third. And I mean, that was really the summary of his day. 5 runs given up. And he didn't pitch that great in his first outing when I saw him throw. So I worry about if he's going to be your weekend starter, let alone your Friday night guy. I don't know if he's necessarily ready to just hold on to those duties right out of the gate. So if it were me, maybe start him out in the bullpen, maybe ramp him up in a midweek role just to build his confidence. Then you could throw him into the rotation. As for guys I would like to see in this rotation and what I think the weekend rotation could look like, I think Matthew Becker has been exceptional. He had a great outing on Friday. Dylan Eskew was pretty solid too. I really like where he's at. And then you've also got Jake McCoy as another guy that could kind of round out your rotation. So in no particular order, those 3 guys really stood out to me when they all threw on Friday. And the rest of the weekend seemed to kind of be a little bit of a mixed bag, especially today. Some guys gave up runs, but I think overall that's kind of where I see this team at right now.
Well, we always talk about guys that are going to start for South Carolina, but you and I both know this very well. The bullpen can make or break a game for you. And I think for South Carolina, a big question a lot of people have is how confident do you feel in the bullpen this upcoming year for the Gamecocks? Because obviously you got your starters that set the tone, but we've seen more often than not in the sport of baseball, like I said, that you can win games and you can most certainly lose games with a bullpen that either performs well or doesn't. So what do you think?
That's a great question, and it's a great point you make, Kendall. Like, the bullpen can make or break the chances of winning and losing. And here's the thing. I couldn't really tell you how the bullpen is going to look until we get to know what the rotation officially looks like. Because here's the thing. If Matthew Becker isn't in the starting rotation, odds are he's probably going to be, probably in the back end of the bullpen as Maneri put it recently, your wild card guy that can close out a game, but he can also go 3-4 innings to get to that point. So I'll be interested to see if he's not in the rotation, he's going to be in the back end of the bullpen probably trying to close out games. So that's one thing down. But if he's in your rotation, who's closing out games is my question. So there's a lot to still unpack with that. And then you've got a lot of guys that aren't going to make the rotation that are going to have to fill out into the bullpen if they're not pitching in midweeks. And that's another thing that I wonder who pitches when and all that sort of stuff. How many innings do you want guys going? And then you got to fill out the rest of your bullpen with other guys because you don't have your Garrett Gainey's anymore. You don't have Chris Veach to kind of nail things down in the later innings. So you're going to have guys step up. From what I saw this weekend, I was fine with what I saw, like I said, with Eskew, Becker. McCoy pitched pretty well until his last inning where he gave a pair of homers. But, today seeing, Brandon Stone's a guy that's getting brought up here, and he's a JUCO guy, transfer, one of the better JUCO players from last year's class and all that in 2024. But I think for me, he struggled today. I mean, he gave up 6 runs and he got really hit around in the second inning. So could he be that guy that ends up slotting into the bullpen, maybe as a closer? I don't know. Maybe. I don't. It's difficult to say. I mean, Roman Kimball struggled with command today. Ashton Crowther got hit around a little bit, but really did settle in. And then a guy like Wyatt Evans, who I think is also going to be in this bullpen, did struggle a little bit. So the bullpen's probably the toughest question to answer with this team, just because it's comprised of so many random guys. It's starters that don't make the cut in the rotation, and then you got your other guys that can go a few innings. So I think they do have some names like Parker Marlott, maybe Becker, Tyler Pitzer's another name that I see thrown around a bit as guys that can really help you out in the bullpen. But yeah, it's tough to replace the guys that you lost from last year's team.
Well, to have a guy like Matthew Becker, just piggybacking off of what you said, that can be so versatile, it is really huge for South Carolina. But just to clarify, and I think this is what I was picking up from what you were putting down, you would prefer to see Becker in a starting spot, correct?
I think so. I think with him, you got to just figure out one role for him. The thing that is always been the case with Matthew is that he started out so hot in his career at South Carolina. Obviously, we all remember that start he had against Texas where he shut down the Longhorns back when he was a freshman, and then he went on the road to Knoxville and put together a really good start over 6 innings. And then he's kind of floated around between being a starter in regional play and stuff. He's been a closer in some cases. He's been a midweek guy. He's been a bullpen arm. I mean, the roles just change for him so often to where it's like find one consistent role for this guy and let him just go. Because I don't know what it does to the psyche or anything, but I feel like mentally it's got to just like throw you off to where it's like, you know, you're pitching one day in a starting role, the next you're closing a game. It's just, I don't know. I don't feel like that works super well for South Carolina in the past when we've seen them do that. But again, this is a new coaching staff. It's a new time. So maybe they'll find that one role. But for me, I would like to see him as a starter just because I think he gives you the best opportunity to win in that case, in that standpoint.
And it is such a good point. And we talk about this a lot, actually, like at the professional level as well. When you're thinking about the way that it is so different for guys, whether they're starting a game, whether they're coming in as a middle reliever, whether they're closing a game, like whatever it might be, that's a different process when you think about how you're preparing yourself mentally for that in being in those different situations. So when you're not somewhere consistently, I would imagine, obviously I haven't been in that situation myself, but I would imagine that it's very hard because, you know, you're going back and forth and you don't get used to one certain thing. And obviously if you're starting, there is a whole entire process that leads into it. Some people like to do yoga 5 hours before they start and then 4 hours before they start. And it's very detail oriented, that process. Whereas if you're coming in relief, it's so different because it obviously just depends on the circumstances of the game. Things could change, whatever it might be. So it's a little bit more spur of the moment there, less time to really prepare for that process and obviously going into the game. So it is a really good point. As you said, just finding that stability and that consistency for a player, I think is huge. I would imagine it's at least huge. We can get Matthew Becker on the show and we can ask him. So.
Yeah, definitely need to at some point throughout the season here. But yeah, no, you're totally right. Like you need that stability. And look, some guys are going to be tossed around, I think, into different roles. I think that's just the way it's going to go, especially from a pitching standpoint, where it's like, okay, you know, you can have a guy that is really pitching well in middle relief, a few innings, like as your long relief guy, and he's shutting them down. It's like maybe you move him to the midweek rotation or something. Maybe you move him to a weekend spot. And injuries are also going to happen, too, to where a guy goes down and you got to have someone else step up. That is going to happen at some point, probably. Knock on wood, they stay healthy as can be, but that's just something you want to prepare for. So we'll see. And again, I think there's a lot of guys that could definitely end up in significant roles for South Carolina. Just because you start the year out not making the rotation doesn't mean you can't, you know, wind up in a better spot by season's end. But yeah, so definitely liking where this pitching staff's at, but there's still obviously a little bit of work to do.
Well, we can officially say that South Carolina plays baseball this month. I forgot it is February now. So we can say that officially, which is very exciting. And, you know, this is a question we're going to get a ton here, especially through these scrimmages. We get ready for opening day. Who is standing out to you, Jack?
Yeah. So number one, obviously, it's got to be Ethan Petrie, right? I mean, the guy hit 3 homers in 3 days in the opening weekend of scrimmages, and then he went deep again. on Saturday, and I heard it was a ball that went off the batter's eye out at Founders Park. So that's a pretty deep shot out there. Talmadge LeCroy also has been standing out. And then one more thing with Petrie. He did strike out 3 times today, which might be a little bit concerning. He did whiff a few times throughout the weekend, but that's going to happen with a guy that you're counting on so much as a power hitter in this lineup. Other than that, Talmadge LeCroy has been pretty good putting the ball in play. I've liked what I've seen out of him. Nathan Hall, I think, is going to be your leadoff hitter this season. He went 3 for 4 on Sunday with a 3-run homer and just looks really comfortable at the plate for South Carolina. Henry Kazmar is another guy that I'm liking in that 2-hole for Carolina. And again, the list goes on and on with hitters and stuff. But I think from a pitching standpoint, as I mentioned before, Matthew Becker has been standing out. Had a good outing the other day. Jake McCoy, I thought, did pretty well too. He gave up a homer on the first pitch of his outing on Friday, and then I think he sat down like the next 10 of 11 batters, which is pretty good. And then his last inning, he did struggle, giving up 2 homers. But overall, he's looked pretty sharp, and I think he'll end up being a weekend guy. And then other than that, I'm trying to think of pitchers off the top of my head that I think threw pretty well. I think Ashton Crowther did pitch very well today, all things considered. He did give up a leadoff homer to Nolan Naraki, who's back from injury now in the bottom of the first today. But after that, he only gave up 1 run over the next 2.5 innings. So looking pretty good from that standpoint. And I think I'm feeling pretty good about where things are at with some guys stepping up.
Positive comments so far from you, Jack. I love to hear it.
Yeah.
And as we look ahead to opening day, and just based on what you've seen so far, yes, the wait is almost over.
It's almost over. Less than 2 weeks.
We cannot wait. But Jack, from your perspective right now, I kind of want to balance it out a little bit here. So from what you've seen, what are you most excited about with this group? And what are you most concerned about right now?
Yeah, I think number one, there's a few ways you can go with what you're excited about, because there's obviously a lot more to be excited about than the negatives. But I think from a positive standpoint, I really like the way, especially today, the way this team puts the ball in play. One of the major criticisms with South Carolina, just for forever, it feels like now, is that every year I feel like I hear that this team is home run or strikeout and all this and that. I think they have a consistent lineup that is going to be able to put the ball in play and find areas where, like defensive positioning wise, South Carolina is just really putting the ball in play when the shift is on, going to the opposite field, hitting the ball where the second baseman isn't, or dropping a little looping fly ball into right field where a right fielder might have to really come on in. So I think from that standpoint, South Carolina is doing a good job of putting the ball in play, moving runners over, getting runs in. They're obviously going to have some home run power. That's the thing you get with a guy like Ethan Petrie, Kennedy Jones, players like that in the middle of your order that can give you some thump, which is not a bad thing. At the same time, though, you have a lineup 1 through 9 that I think is going to hit for a good average overall collectively, and I think they're going to score a lot of runs this season, which should definitely help out with the pitching staff and some of maybe the uncertainties that we have from that standpoint. And I think that kind of leads me into the transition of what I'm concerned about. I think it is 2 things. I think it is, how does this pitching staff ultimately end up shaking out? I mentioned Jerzenbeck before. I don't know if he's necessarily ready to be your Friday night ace right out of the gate. That's not me saying he can't do it. That is not what I'm saying. So let's not get that twisted. I think he can at some point. But for right now, I think he's better off just build him up to where he can be in that Friday night role. Because again, he has not thrown since like May of 2023 when he underwent Tommy John surgery. So I know he's been throwing in scrimmages and stuff, but that's not the same thing as going to face like North Carolina, Clemson, SEC opponents, stuff like that. So wonder how he'll turn out, as well as the rest of this pitching staff. And then I think defensively, I mentioned it before, I think they've been better on defense in scrimmages, but they have been prone to their errors from time to time. How much better are they going to be defensively? How much better can they, defend when it's like the ball's coming right at them? And they were prone to making errors last season that ended up hurting them in some games. I think back to the SEC tournament where they should have won those games really no problem, that they lost both in because of the defensive mistakes that they would make in these games. And I know it's different because Talmadge LeCroy is over at third base and stuff, and he was a big part of those errors. Now he'll be behind the plate. But how does the rest of your defense kind of shake out? Because I know that's something Maneri's been so, heavily preaching on is if you're going to play for this team, you have to play defense. So I'll be interested to see how they are from a defensive standpoint too.
Yeah, you talk about Maneri there, and I'm curious from this point of view, when you think about the team this year and where they're at right now, what kind of shifts have you noticed in culture? A lot of people are very excited, obviously, about this coaching change. They wanted something fresh. They wanted something different for this year. That's what they're getting here. So I know it's kind of early to tell, especially because we haven't been in any real game situations yet. But have you noticed any kind of shift from a culture perspective under new leadership?
One thing I have heard from players talking to them a little bit is that there seems to be much more accountability. And that is not to say that under the previous staff there was no accountability and stuff. That's not at all the case. But there's just something about Paul Maneri and the presence he comes in with. Like, he's obviously the winningest coach, winningest active coach in college baseball right now. And he's a guy that has been a coach at the college level for more than 40 years now. He's a guy that has been everywhere, won national championships, been in Omaha. He knows what it takes to win. And you see him walk in, it's like he's got this stoic presence to him that just, like, you have to lock in when he's out there. And this coaching staff, you hear them during scrimmages and stuff, making sure players are doing things the right way and stuff, and trying to help them out and stuff. At the same time, it also does feel like the players are comfortable, they're loose out there, they're having a good time. But at the same time, when they know they have to get down to business and stuff, they're going to do it. So that'll be something I'm interested to see, is how this group really meshes as the season goes on. I think they have meshed very well to this point. And when adversity does strike this season, it always will. SEC plays a 30-game gauntlet where you're going to lose some games here and there. Heck, maybe you lose the Clemson series right out of the gate in non-conference play. How does that impact the team? How do they respond, I think, is the big thing, because we saw this team kind of go through the ups and downs of last year. They were right in the thick of getting to host a regional, maybe even a super. Then you got swept by Georgia and Tennessee, and it's like, okay, well, the end of the tenure is near for your former head coach now and stuff. And then they go out to the SEC tournament. They have a good week, but it ends on a sour note. And then you kind of get, you don't play your best ball in regionals and you get eliminated. So how is this team going to respond to when the moment strikes where they need to step up? And that'll be the big thing, that amongst all these things that we're talking about, that really pique my interest of how this team's going to look this year.
Yep, and they're laying the groundwork now, obviously, with the accountability. This is an interesting comment here, and I do feel like this is something that was talked about a lot last year. We always bring up wanting these players to be their best, but so much of the role of a college baseball coach is continuing to develop players, even when you feel like they are at their best, continuing to work with them, continuing to develop them. And I think there have been certain situations in the past where people feel like maybe someone who came and played at South Carolina hadn't reached their full potential. And that happens everywhere. Like, that's not a knock on the last coaching staff or anything. That happens. But I think with Paul Maneri and his success and what he's been able to do and the people that he's worked with and gotten to various levels of their career, I think a lot of people are excited to see the way that that will play out for South Carolina. So what players in specific are you most excited to watch the development of under Paul Maneri?
I'm very interested, and that's a great point you made about, and this comment too right here, just about, it did feel like last season there was potential just wasted, to be honest. And you could have had such a better season last year, coming off a year where you made a super regional in 2023, and then, you don't make it there last year. And that's honestly why you see so much change now. But I do think some names that really stick out as guys that I'm looking forward to seeing how they grow under this new staff. Jake McCoy is a name that I brought up a few times now. He only made 12 appearances last year. And the thing with Jake is that he's got some of the best stuff on the team. He throws about as hard as anyone, up in the upper 90s, which is what this team needs. They haven't really had that flamethrower, if you will, that hits the 97s, maybe even the 96s, 95s, things like that consistently. And he's also a guy that has a really nice pitch mix now, adding a changeup in this year and being a 3-pitch guy now. So he's a guy that didn't get to pitch in the fall last year, didn't make his college debut till the Ole Miss series to open up SEC play. So he only got half the season, and he's in this role where he's a midweek guy, and then he's pitching, garbage time innings in relief. This year, I do think he's going to take on such a bigger role to where you're counting on him as a weekend guy, in my opinion. And I'm interested to see how that develops because all the tools are there for him, in my opinion. And then I think just some other guys that I'm from a position player standpoint. How is Will Tippett going to do? That's a name that gets thrown around quite a bit, in my opinion, because he's someone that he's been here for 3 years now, or well, this is his third year now. He's never really hit for average, but I think this is the year we're going to see Will finally kind of break through. I think he ends up starting this season. I know Nolan Naraki's a guy that is coming back now. He's getting into the swing of things, but keep in mind with Nolan is he's a Clemson transfer, got hurt in the fall. He's just now getting back. He's only been hitting, so he hasn't been playing the field or anything like that, running the bases. So he's still got some ways to go. Will's been out there playing first, second, third. Hasn't been playing shortstop because you have Henry Kazmar over there. So how does he fit into the equation? I think he plays second base, and with his speed, he's definitely putting the bat to the ball a lot better this year in scrimmages and whatnot since the fall. I think he ends up being a guy that could be very impactful as a utility guy that maybe starts out the year at second and then moves over maybe once Naraki gets fully healthy. So Will's another guy that I think can definitely thrive under this coaching staff.
Yeah, and that's one of the best things, like just getting to watch players grow and develop and ultimately get to their ceiling, get to their highest level. And you want to see that obviously as South Carolina, but as they continue to grow into their careers too, I think Paul Mainieri has a really great opportunity here with this team and the ability to really make a difference with some of these guys that we know have that talent, have the ability to be really, really good. It's just that maybe one extra step, one extra thing, and maybe under new leadership that kind of gives them the opportunity to do that. Jack, from your perspective though, this is always fun to talk about just from a media perspective of getting to cover these coaches. Obviously, we've got it great at South Carolina with some really awesome coaches. You talk about Don Staley earlier. Shane Beamer is obviously one that's a blast to cover too. How has it been covering Paul Mainieri so far?
I'm going to be quite honest. I think I've spoken about this before, maybe on here, but it's just there's such a difference in the vibes you get covering this team versus years past. And I've only covered this team regularly, like full time, probably since 2020. Honestly, since 2023, really, but overall since 2020. And all those years were under Mark Kingston and stuff. And I love covering Mark. Mark's a good dude. I wish him well at Creighton and all his success out there at Omaha. Hopefully he has a good run out there. But with Paul, it's just like the vibes just feel different. He might be older, but he definitely is so personable, right? He reminds me of with for you, Kendall, like with Shane Beamer and stuff, and Dawn. It's like that, honestly, where they want to build that connection with the media and stuff, and that's such a good thing to see. Like Paul wanting to talk to the media and stuff, and talking to the players. It's just you can definitely sense that there's something different. Like, for instance, just a random example. With Media Day this year, we're talking to the guys on the field and stuff. It's just like you go around talking to who you want to and stuff, and they're all cool with it. It's years past, and I don't know why, but it's just like you talk to select players, and that's it. Like you can, that's one difference, but it's also like you can just tell that the vibes are very much different. Like they're better, I think, this year as opposed to years past, where it's like you head into last year thinking, okay, if South Carolina doesn't have a great year, a lot of change is going to come. And of course it did. So we know with this staff that the goal is to get to Omaha. It feels like a new era, and it is, of people are excited about this team. Like I remember all last year, every single day during baseball season, it was on the message boards. It was, when's Kingston getting fired? When are things going to change? All this and that. And I think it's refreshing to see people talk about, maybe getting to Omaha, maybe having a great season, seeing what Paul Mainieri is going to do. So again, he's a blast to cover. It was funny during the press conference the other day, which we have a comment mentioning here. To kind of summarize it, I don't have the video on me here, but during like the first minute of his press conference the other day, Paul, obviously speaks for nearly about an hour each press conference, gives such great detailed answers and has great stories to tell, which I love hearing about. But he got a phone call during like the opening minute of his press conference. It's like the Godfather, like theme music as his ringtone, and he's like talking on the phone for a minute and stuff. And he's so charismatic and so funny with his quirkiness and stuff. So Paul's a good dude to cover, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this season unfolds for him and his return to college baseball.
Yeah, I think that energy and that personality is huge, especially in a sport like baseball when it does certainly become a grind and it's day in, day out type of stuff. And you have a leader like that who I feel like the group up to this point seems like they really have rallied around and really enjoy being around and having him. And with all of his success, clearly he has every tool possible to get South Carolina where they want to be, which is back to the College World Series, winning the College World Series. We've said it so many times. That is the expectation for the program, and that isn't going to change because South Carolina has had such an incredible history baseball-wise. So that's something that South Carolina wants, and I think they're on the right track. Would you agree?
Oh, totally. I think they are on the right track. They are in a much better place now as opposed to where they were. I forget what the day was, but it was like June 2nd or whatever when they got eliminated from the regionals. And I'm getting ready to drive back from Raleigh, and I get a text that Kingston's been fired and stuff. It's just times are so much different now. You can just tell that while they haven't even played a game yet, it's like, again, the energy is there, the excitement is there. I'm very interested to see how the fan base shows up to Founders Park this season because, look, with scrimmages and stuff, not a lot of people show up because it's like people got work and stuff. They fall during a weekday, like 4 o'clock or whatever. So I'm really intrigued to see how the fan base shows up for opening day, packs it out opening weekend. I know there's basketball going on and all that stuff during that time. I think the women's team plays UConn that weekend, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the crowd get back to Founders Park. Hopefully they get to host a regional this year because, I mean, that place 2 years ago when they hosted that regional and won to get to Gainesville for the Super, I've never seen Founders Park quite as loud and into it. And that was such a good time in Carolina baseball. And I think there are better days ahead with the new coaching staff and a lot of players that bring excitement to the ballpark.
Well, when I was in Columbia and going to South Carolina, and obviously you and I graduated in the same year, I loved going to Founders Park. Obviously covered the football team, so I didn't really sit at Williams-Brice Stadium outside of being in the press box or on the field from my freshman year on. But I did have the opportunity at times to go take in games at Founders Park. So maybe this makes me a little biased, but I would say Founders Park on a beautiful day when it is packed out is probably my favorite sports venue at South Carolina.
Totally.
And I love Willie B. Like, do not get me wrong.
Yes.
Love it. And again, I haven't really experienced Williams-Brice Stadium. I went this past year for the Ole Miss game, but I'm not going to bring that up. So, yeah, I haven't experienced Williams-Brice Stadium truly as like a fan in quite some time, but Founders Park, incredible. And yes, this comment I think is so true. Like, you think about your Dawn Staley, who's obviously amazing with the media, has such a great personality. You think about Shane Beamer, who I covered at South Carolina, and he is the best and wants to have great relationships with the people that cover his team, and he goes above and beyond to be so kind. And even Lamont Paris, I've said this story on my X account before, he's fantastic. I met him first time at the golf tournament, Birdies with Beamer golf tournament a couple of years ago. Saw him the next day out at a sushi restaurant, and he came up to my table and was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you again." It was so awesome, just a great guy. And then you have a guy now like Paul Maneri, who I have not met, but I have seen, and he seems like he's right in line with where everybody else is. And that goes across the board, really, for a lot of these coaches at South Carolina. You think about Shelley Smith and some of the other coaches that are just phenomenal. South Carolina has done a really, really good job. And again, I haven't worked directly like covering other college teams, so I can't say how it is for every other school, but I would imagine that it's not like that consistently for a lot of other schools. And I really do feel like it's a consistent thing at South Carolina that these head coaches are really, really fantastic people. And that's you.
Totally. No, I agree with you on that. And yeah, I can't speak to the whole other schools, what it's like either, but you see that South Carolina hires the right people. And that goes with giving credit to Ray Tanner, the now former athletics director, who brought all these coaches in that we've talked about. And I think with Paul, this being his last major hire, I think it's going to be a good one. I think it really is. You've seen Paul go out to all these Gamecock club events all over the state and stuff. He's going out into the community, meeting people. Like, he was just at the men's basketball game yesterday, speaking to the crowd at halftime when the team got introduced and all that stuff. So that's awesome to see. And we all remember when he decided, say that the football team's going to open up a can of whoop ass at the Missouri game, which of course they did. So it's cool to see just how Paul connects so well with people and stuff. And again, the stories he has to tell, like I know from being with the media and stuff, I get to hear a lot of this stuff, up close and personal, but I know for the fans out there that have gotten the chance to talk to him and stuff, I'm sure they have the same exact thoughts and things to say about this guy. Like, I mean, he hasn't coached a game yet at South Carolina, but you can already tell he's so beloved in this community and stuff. And, winning is going to only help with that. At the same time, though, there are going to be losses on the schedule. I hope the fan base doesn't so quickly turn and be like, fire this guy. That never really solves anything. Like we're seeing this going on with men's basketball right now where they're going through this rut. But, Lamont Paris won 26 games a season ago. No reason why he can't get this thing turned around and do it again at some point in the near future. And it's the same thing for Paul Mainieri. This guy's a winner, been a winner everywhere he's gone. So I trust him to be the guy that gets South Carolina back to where they want to go.
Yeah, a couple of points on that. It is so cool to have a guy like him because he does have such a history in what he's been able to accomplish. I just feel like even sitting there, like people might say, oh my gosh, an hour-long press conference, that's horrible. Like, no, that is great. That is music to our ears. We love those in-depth answers. And really, it's an opportunity to learn from someone like him who, I mean, I would love to just sit down with him for like an hour and just
it's amazing.
About anything baseball related or even life related, just because of all the things that he's done. But that is so neat to have a guy like that because, you have coaches that come from different situations. Obviously, Shane Beamer coming into his first head coaching job, that's a different situation than a guy like Paul Mainieri who has been there, done that, and had a ton of success. But on the point of Lamont Paris, I know we're not talking about men's basketball on the show here today, but I mean, it's kind of like Shane. Like in his first year, it was great. And then, wasn't so, second year was great. Then it wasn't so great. And then it was back to being way better. So there's, it's not always linear, the path to success. And, and we do say that here on the show quite a bit. But I love the fact that Paul is getting out and going to see people, going to Gamecock Club events. I remember when Lamont came to my sorority at South Carolina. He freaked out. And he came into one of our meetings and was encouraging everyone to come out to the game. So that was really cool. And it's great for these coaches to make the connections that they do with the fans, because we all know South Carolina fans are some of the best in the world, some of the most dedicated in the world, for sure. And they just want their baseball team to be good. So that is the goal this year for South Carolina. We'll see how it pans out. We're going to talk about it a ton more here on the show. Jack and I are getting into one of our favorite times of the year, baseball season. I can't wait. I know you can't either.
Me too. I'm so excited. We are it's February 14th is 12 days from now. It's getting close, y'all. And I hope to see a lot of you guys at the ballpark this year. And
forget Valentine's Day. Everybody.
Forget Valentine's Day. Go to the ballpark.
You're going to opening day.
Bring your significant other if you want. Have a date at the ballpark. It's going to be a great weekend to kickstart the 2025 season. And I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
That is the perfect date going to a baseball game. It doesn't get any better than that. So, yeah. The only other thing I would say is we've had a lot of proposals that happen. And I think a date at a baseball game is good, but I think a proposal at a baseball game, everybody has their own thing, but I think I would freak out. And I like to be on, we talk for a living. It's not a fear of being on the big screen. It's just.
Did you hear about the wedding at the Cheez-It Bowl? Or the Citrus Bowl?
I was there.
Oh my God.
I made a TikTok about it, and it started to gain some traction because I was like, "What is this? Is not real." Because I actually don't think it was. I think that they had already been married or something.
Oh, totally.
I don't know. I don't know how that worked out.
It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. And that was at a football game. I mean, I know at baseball, it's so common for people to do the proposals and stuff. You see it all the time obviously with your job and stuff, but it's a wedding. That's something I've never seen before.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was wild.
That was crazy. And then yesterday at the Senior Bowl, someone had a big sign and asked someone to marry them, and Riley Leonard went viral for being he was so excited, and he was like, I hope she said yes. So yeah, anyways, we've gotten way off on a tangent here. The Cheez-It Bowl or the Citrus Bowl Cheez-It wedding, guys, it was
weird.
Go look at my TikTok if you want to see what it was like, or I'm sure you can find it somewhere else. But it was interesting for sure. Anyways, I think now that we've gotten to this point where we're going back to talking about the Citrus Bowl and the wedding that happened during timeouts, I think that's our cue to call it a night.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good.
We've got it all here today. We're going to be back on Wednesday at our regularly scheduled time. So be sure to check us out on Wednesday with another edition of GC Live. But we appreciate all of you joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Have a great start to the week tomorrow. For Jack Veltri, I'm Kendall Smith. This has been the Sunday Reset here on Gamecock Central. We'll see you all soon.